So the Packers have once again claimed the 7th seed and lost their first playoff game. And this coming after a complete and total collapse once again in Chicago. So the question becomes, what now? Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, a podcast where you don't not a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. It's like we do the same thing over and over and over again. Grossi. And today we are going to be talking about what's next for the Green Bay Packers. Kind of just wanted to do a season wrap up, but also look ahead because there are some interesting conversations that are happening right now in Green Bay about the short-term future, whether it's with the coaching staff, whether it's with incoming free agents, which will probably be a separate video. But I also want to talk about Super Bowl windows and realistically what the Packers are looking for within these next two seasons as they try and get a Lombardi. And before we get into anything, I want to do a big shout and thank you to you all. We just hit 981,000 subscribers, which means we are now 19,000 away from 1 million. We should be hitting it within the next couple of weeks. Feel free to subscribe. It is free to do so. We run a free show here, no sponsors whatsoever, and thank you so much as we get closer and closer to the milli. Now, what makes this offseason really interesting is how the Packers lost in Chicago. And the reason I say that is because of brand new Packers president, Ed Policy. Ed Policy had been asked way before, we're talking months before the Chicago game, that he does not want a lame duck coach. What that means is that Matt LaFleur, his contract is up after this upcoming season, and Ed Policy does not want him to just play out that contract while there's speculation in and outside the building of, oh, is Matt LaFleur going to be back next year, because it creates distractions, the whole nine, and just Ed Policy, that's not what he's looking to do. And so it comes to absolutely the surprise of nobody, if you've been paying attention to what Ed Policy is saying, that now him and Matt LaFleur are talking about a contract extension. What makes this interesting is because before the game this past Saturday, I was like, yeah, Matt LaFleur, he's probably going to get like a 3 to 5 year extension. We'll see what they want to do with him. But now, after this collapse, where Matt LaFleur came out and said, listen, I'm embarrassed for anybody associated with the Green Bay Packers, yeah, it was that bad of a loss. And I think that that throws a wrench into what this extension could look like. In addition, near the end of the season, Ed Policy released an article talking about how happy he was with the development of the Packers this season, especially when it came to winning within the division. The Packers in 2024 only won one divisional game, and that was based off of a blocked field goal against the Chicago Bears. Other than that, they lost against every other division rival. This season, things were much better as they only lost 2 games within the division, and that last one, they started Clayton Tune against the Vikings. So yeah, some improvement there. And that brings us to the conversation about Matt LaFleur in general. Of course, heading into this season, expectations were pretty damn high, especially after trading for Micah Parsons, that this was going to be the guy that was going to put the defense over the top because they had a really good defense last year. Last year, they had a top 10 defense in nearly every category except for passing defense, where they ranked 12th. But they were 5th in run defense, and they were 8th in points allowed per game. And before the season started, I put out a whole video about what to expect from the Packers, and one of the things that they needed to get better at was getting after the quarterback. Their pass rush win rate was not great last season, and you really needed to see guys like LVN finally start to develop, because after he came out of college, he was a very raw talent. He had a ton of athleticism, but didn't have a lot of technique. On top of that, you wanted to see Rashawn Gary return to form before he got that big time contract. And the biggest concern I had was the lack of corner depth, because the Packers only drafted Micah Robinson in the 7th round, and now he's on the Tennessee Titans. And so the reason why I'm talking about why Micah Parsons was such a big deal is because already a good defense just got a once in a generational player. So yeah, that's going to make the secondary look better, and it's also going to solve the issue of the Packers pass rush. So the reason I bring up Parsons is because, damn, expectations were insanely high before this season started, especially for Matt LaFleur. Now, Jeff Hafley had a great season last year, and so expectations were not only going to be high for that defense, but taking a look at the offense, the Packers drafted Matthew Golden, though I did tell you not to have really high expectations because the Packers usually don't play their rookies right away. But the defense wasn't the only thing that Packers fans were excited about, because last year, their offense was pretty pretty damn good too. They ranked 12th in passing yards, which is the exact same in 2023. They had a top 5 run game coming in at number 5 in running offense. That improved from 15th back in 2023. And they were a top 10 scoring offense, ranking 8th, which again was an improvement from 2023, where they ranked 12th. And so heading into this season, I was excited about Jordan Love because one, we got to see him for an entire season because of course he got banged up in that Philadelphia game during week 1. But I also said after they lost to the Eagles in the wild card round that within these next 2 years, we're really going to find out who Jordan Love is. And so the reason I'm giving you all this context is because expectations changed as soon as the Packers, one, found out that Jordan Love was a pretty damn good ball player and they gave him $55 million a year. But expectations radically shifted once they got Micah Parsons. And so now there is a ton of pressure on Matt LaFleur and this coaching unit to try and get to a Super Bowl because the Packers' window for success, that window is only so open where they can find that perfect medium between cap space and also retaining these big name players before those cap hits start to explode later down the line. And so then this season plays out. The Packers get the 7th seed once again. They have a chance to win the division. Of course, that doesn't go through. They have a complete and total collapse in a few games. That Cleveland Browns game early on in the season, what a disaster that was. And that should have been an indicator of like, hey, we need to get these things fixed because we've seen this problem happen before. But unfortunately, it happened again. Not only did it happen in Chicago during the regular season, but just 3 weeks later, it happened in the playoffs. The Packers were up 21-3. Their offense was clicking. Their defense was actually playing pretty damn good. But in that second half, things completely and totally fell apart. The offensive line didn't block. The team couldn't move the freaking football. They kept on giving it right back to the Bears, who eventually just kept on scoring in the fourth quarter. And now the Packers are out of the playoffs. And so after such an embarrassing loss, now question is, okay, is Matt LaFleur the guy for the job? And I have criticized Matt LaFleur on this channel many times, especially when it's come to situational football. On top of that, his personnel decisions have been infuriating at times. I'll go back to the Josh Nijman situation where LaFleur just made the wrong decision going up against the 49ers. That offensive line was not the best that it possibly could have been. And again, also retaining personnel. Rich Bisaccia, good God, this falls under Matt LaFleur. While we can give him a ton of credit for getting Jeff Hafley, right, and that seems to have worked out, though this season was not as good as I wanted it to be, the fact that Rich Bisaccia is still employed by the Packers and is getting the salary that he does is kind of mind-boggling. Of course, the Packers needed to get better at special teams after that horrific loss in the divisional round against the 49ers back during the 2021 season. But since then, the special teams has not really improved. We saw that with Brandon McManus and the entire kicking debacle that we had this season, where they had Havrasik in, the substitute teacher. He came in, he played pretty well. Then he wound up sitting back down. McManus missed a few kicks, but then McManus started to right the ship a little bit, but unfortunately left 7 points on the board from this past Saturday, which is just not acceptable in a playoff game. On top of that, I do want to give Rich Bisaccia a lot of credit for developing Dan Whelan. He has become one of the best punters in the league, which I'm very happy to see, but the special teams just feels like, once again, a side note, and that the team really doesn't care about it. They don't have a ton of dedicated players just for special teams. They had Keyshawn Nixon returning kicks, but now he wanted to play corner, and that's not going well. And as of right now, in terms of special team return yards, they're tied for 22nd in kick returns, averaging 25.2 yards per return, which means when the Packers are not getting a touchback, on average, they're starting at the 25-yard line, which is where they would have started back in the old kickoff rules. And so that's a 10 full yards behind where it would be for a touchback today, which is not acceptable. On top of that, when you want to talk about punt return, good God, they rank dead last in punt return yard average. They are averaging 5.6 yards per punt return. And they're sending Jaden Reed back there. They're sending Romeo Doubs back there. They're just sending back other wide receivers to go, okay, maybe this is going to work out. Again, there is not a specific focus for special teams. And while this is infuriating heading into this season, now the fact that special teams under the new rules plays such a huge factor in the NFL, yeah, you can't be paying Rich Bisaccia this kind of money. And again, that falls on Matt LaFleur because he's the one who's picking these guys and is not letting his staff go. And for Bisaccia, it's been time to go. And so now when we're talking about the LaFleur policy conversation about what an extension will look like, it's a little bit more complicated than, oh, all right, well, maybe Ed Policy just gets over it and just lets him be a lame duck coach. Just coach for your future. If you wind up winning a Super Bowl, fantastic. We'll pay you a lot of money. If you don't, then it'll be time to move on. But like in every negotiation, it does take two to tango. And the problem is that the LaFleur conversation is a little bit more complicated. Yes, you're very happy that they improved in some areas, especially when it comes to winning divisional games. They swept the Lions. That was really damn nice. But in terms of their offense and their defense, they took a step back in nearly every single category. From passing offense, they went from 12th to 17th. From rushing offense, they went from 5th to 15th. And points per game scored, they went from 8th to 16th. When you look at the defense, they improved a little bit in passing defense. They went from 13th to 11th. But run defense, they went from 7th to 18th. And points allowed per game, they went from 6th to 11th. And so these are enormous drop-offs, right? And still, I think the team is overall a very good squad where they're ranking top 15 on both offense and defense. However, once again, they did not win the division. They got the 7th seed for this third straight year. And this is now back-to-back years that they have lost in the wild card round. Now, of course, context does matter because after that Denver game, Zach Tom never saw the field again. You didn't see Micah Parsons once again. And of course, you can look at teams like the 49ers and Shanahan, who they were able to knock off the defending Super Bowl champs, right? So injuries can't be an excuse. But at the same time, the 49ers went through times where they did not have a winning record. And Matt LaFleur has at least, I know that people don't like this excuse about it being the youngest team, he has brought them to a winning record and a playoff berth in these past 3 years, which I do think he deserves some credit for. At the same time, though, you look at these collapses and these are just not acceptable and unfortunately is a thing that we have seen over and over again. And so the Packers will come out and look really good in the first half, but they'll completely collapse in the fourth quarter. Or we've seen the other way around where they start really damn slow in the first half and then they wind up picking up steam in the second half, but maybe it's not enough to get some wins. And the LaFleur issue gets even more complicated when it comes down to salary. When Matt LaFleur was hired, head coaches were not getting the kind of money that they are getting. You look at a guy like Ben Johnson, who's getting about $14.5 to $15 million a year. He was hired last season. John Harbaugh just got $20 million a year from the Giants. Matt LaFleur, while his exact salary is not known, it's supposed to be in the range between $6 to $8 million. So he is due for a payday. And do not get me wrong, if he somehow leaves the Green Bay Packers, he is going to get paid. He will be highly sought after. And I know that there are some fans that do not want to hear that, but Ed Policy knows this. And so the conversations now between LaFleur and him are, okay, what is this contract structure going to look like? Is it going to be a 2 to 3 year extension where the Packers are going to have some flexibility? Or are you going to give him a ton of money and try to lock him into a long-term contract? I don't think that that is what it's going to look like. I think you're going to see potentially a 2 to 3 year deal, because in that case, LaFleur would be under contract basically through Jordan Love's contract, which expires after the 2028 season. And of course, they're going to wind up re-signing him unless Jordan Love falls off a cliff. But it does throw a wrench into some things because Matt LaFleur can probably be a very highly paid coach outside of Green Bay. And so he does have a little bit of negotiating power, even though you just had the epic collapse that we saw against the Bears. And if you want to just hear my take on this, I feel like it makes sense for Matt LaFleur to stay for at least one more season. The reason I say that is because you look at the head coaching candidates that are out there. There are none that are like, oh man, this guy is definitely going to come in and immediately be better. And I'm sorry, you kind of need someone to be immediately better. And I'm not saying that there is not a coach better than Matt LaFleur out there, but the problem is the Packers have this Super Bowl window really within these next 2 years before they really got to start restructuring and things are going to change. Folks are going to leave. And so within those 2 years, are you going to be able to have a new head coach come on in, be able to coach this offense to be a Super Bowl caliber team within the next 2 seasons? Because if you can't, yeah, then it's not really worth it, in my opinion. And Matt LaFleur, while he definitely has some limitations, and in terms of his short-term future, I don't know what it's going to look like in Green Bay, because I can definitely see a realistic scenario that within the next 2 seasons, if he doesn't get them over the hump, I don't think Matt LaFleur is going to be employed by the Packers anymore. Throw on top of that, Jeff Hafley is currently taking head coaching interviews right now, so who knows if he's going to be back. Micah Parsons seems to think so. But when we're talking about Matt LaFleur, you had a bunch of leaders in the locker room speak out for LaFleur and say, no, this guy should be here. Micah Parsons, for example, is one of those guys. He reached out to Matt LaFleur and said, you're one of the reasons why I came to Green Bay, because you are the head coach. Jordan Love has spoken out for him. And while you have guys like Javon Bullard who have come out and said maybe less than ideal things about LaFleur, the majority of the folks that we have gotten quotes from, they are speaking out in favor of LaFleur. On top of that, this roster is what Goody and LaFleur have worked together to put on the field. And I do think they have the talent to go to the Super Bowl. I think the end of the season was an absolute disaster. And again, I don't know what the future of Matt LaFleur is after these next couple of years, but I imagine that he is going to get an extension within these next few days. Whether it's a 2 to 3 year extension, we are going to see. And yeah, I know what the definition of insanity is, but I feel like if you, one, get better on special teams, which is going to help, if they somehow retain Jeff Hafley, that is going to be a huge boost. And when it comes to LaFleur, yeah, I would love for him to give up play calling at times, but there are times with, like in the first half, where he's able to call a game really well. I think it just comes down to situational, and they are going to need some help in the draft. And so putting the Matt LaFleur situation to the side, let's talk about what next season for the Packers looks like and what they need to do. One, I think this team is automatically going to get better just by getting healthier. When Tucker Kraft went down, that dramatically impacted the offense, not only just because Tucker Kraft is great in the receiving game, but also because he's one hell of a blocker. So that is going to make a difference on the offensive side of things. And who knows, maybe we'll see Marshawn Lloyd, but I'm not counting him for anything right now just because we haven't seen him on the field. On top of that, the Packers are going to get Devontae Wyatt back. They're going to get Micah Parsons back, and that is automatically going to make the defense a lot better. Now, they might lose some guys. We'll see what happens with Quay Walker. We'll see what happens with Keyshawn Nixon. Trayvon Diggs is likely not going to be on the team, or at least with that contract. But Romeo Doubs is probably the big guy from the offense who probably is not going to be back with the Packers, especially because they drafted Matthew Golden. It was very nice to see him get a touchdown. And I really like Romeo Doubs a ton because he can be a good go-to receiver. He usually has some pretty good hands, unless he's on the hands team when it comes to the onside kicks. But overall, yeah, I think Romeo Doubs is going to get a good amount of money, and I don't know if the Packers are going to be able to keep him. And speaking of wide receivers, you're going to have guys like Dontavian Wicks who are going to be in contract here. Christian Watson, they had that 1 year extension, and he had a really good season when he came back from injury, but this is his last year, so we'll kind of see what the Packers are able to do on offense and what the long-term future is for Christian Watson. But the point that I'm making is that that team should automatically be better just by getting healthier, and you just got to pray that they actually remain healthy. But in terms of what the Packers need to address, it's very similar heading into this past draft. They need to go and get corners. I was kind of baffled by the fact that they didn't go out and get corners besides in the 7th round. And besides secondary help, we'll see what happens with Rashawn Gary. He did not have a good season after a hot start. And so who knows if his job is going to be in jeopardy. The Packers can get some cap savings if they cut him before June 1st, but then they're going to potentially need to go out and get some depth at edge rusher. Lucas Van Ness had his best season since coming in the league, so that definitely is a positive, but they also need to go get some offensive line depth. While Goody has done a great job in free agency in previous years, bringing in guys like Josh Jacobs or Xavier McKinney and completely transforming that safety unit, where things have been lacking was last year's free agency class. He brought in Nate Hobbs, who was constantly injured, didn't really help out the secondary, and Aaron Banks, who did not have a very good season. And so I would not be surprised if the Packers are also going to draft some offensive line depth. Usually they do a really nice job there, but yeah, that is something that is an issue, as you saw against the Bears in that second half. And on top of that, the Packers need to figure out what the hell they're going to do at kicker. McManus, I honestly don't know how you keep him on the squad, especially after that debacle against the Chicago Bears. There's a party that goes, all right, well, let's see if he can figure it out. But as I mentioned, it is this 2-year window that is incredibly important for the Packers. And so you are just trying to get every single piece of support that you can to try and go to the Super Bowl. Because let's talk about contracts. Jordan Love, he is under contract through the 2028 season. His cap hit is going to go from $36 million to $42 million in 2027, and then to $74 million in 2028. I'm sure there's going to be restructuring there. The Packers do have an out, though I don't think they're going to utilize it because, again, Jordan Love is not the problem in Green Bay, but they do have a window here before they need to restructure and push some money down the line. And the other big contract, of course, is Micah Parsons, who's with the Packers through the 2029 season. though they do have an out in 2028. However, 2028 is when his contract really starts to hit, as he goes from a $26 million cap hit to $42 million and then $73 million in 2029. Again, this is likely going to be restructured. It's never going to be that kind of cap hit, but this is what I'm talking about. The Packers really have a 2-year window, and especially next season, where it's going to kind of be all or nothing. We're about to find out if this is a Super Bowl caliber squad. I personally think that they are. I think they have enough talent there, but a lot of things have to go right. And that includes coaching personnel. Like I said, Rich Bisaccia, the results are not there. With LaFleur, you and I can agree or disagree on that, but my argument is that you just don't want to bring in a guy during a 2-year Super Bowl window that is a complete unknown, that has to learn this offense, that has to learn this team, rather than keeping the guy who, yes, he has had some success these past 3 years. Granted, it is not a Super Bowl win, but I really just think you stick with LaFleur for the next 2 seasons and see what happens. But again, this could all be thrown out the window if the negotiations fall through and or if they wind up collapsing again next season, because then you're going to be out of excuses. And even if they give him a 2 to 3 year extension, the Packers can cut him at any time and they'll just wind up eating that money. So yeah, definitely a frustrating season for the Packers, and there's a lot of questions heading into the offseason. Again, we just have to kind of wait and see what Ed Policy and Matt LaFleur come up with. I'm hoping that there are coaching changes. Hopefully Halfley can stay. Again, Micah Parsons said he wasn't going anywhere. I just hope that is the case. But ultimately, the Packers need to fix a few things. 1, they need to fix their offensive line. 2, they need to get better corners. And most importantly, they need to figure out why the hell they cannot finish football games. Micah Parsons saying like, hey, you can't coach effort, right? We all saw Keyshawn Nixon jump out of the way when DeAndre Swift was going into the end zone against the Chicago Bears. We saw Rashawn Gary, after having 7.5 sacks to start the season, he fell off a cliff, man, and was basically invisible for 9 games. And while I'm very grateful that we have a guy like Micah Parsons in the locker room, because 1, he's a phenomenal player, but 2, I think he's also going to set that standard. He was very complimentary of LVN, but also was not afraid to go, yeah, these guys need to try more. And there's a lot of things that you could put the blame on Matt LaFleur for, right? You could talk about his play calling, especially, God, when it's, an inside zone out of the shotgun on 4th and short. We all love those. You could talk about coaching personnel and retaining guys like Rich Bisaccia. You could talk about personnel decisions about where guys are going to line up on the offensive line or who they're going to go with when in terms of kicker. But ultimately, it's really difficult to put my finger on why can they not finish football games. Is that coaching? Is that execution? It's probably a mix of both. And if they don't fix those things, then yeah, we're probably going to see a head coaching change within the next couple of seasons. But the good news is that even though this season was frustrating, they still are a good squad. Jordan Love is definitely the guy, and they have the pieces, I think, to make a Super Bowl run next season. We'll see if they can put it all together. We'll see what they do in the draft, and I don't imagine they're going to do a ton in free agency. So yeah, obviously a frustrating season as we head into yet another long offseason, but I think they can do it, man. They just have to put it together, and we'll find out within these next 2 seasons. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. How do you think the Packers should move forward? Let me know. You know, find me at TomGrossiComedy.com, and a big shout and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.